All right, coming up on the Payoff, Noa Shaw went from dealing coke in Studio 54 to the brink of more than 15 years in prison after starting up the first weed delivery service in L.A. He cheated death several times. He's been stabbed, shot at, and he finally almost met the end when, as a drug dealer, he says he became his best customer. If you or somebody you know is having trouble getting sober, it took Noah 12 stints in rehab, but today he's got 14 years. And he's making a living amends to the world through giving hopeless people the love they need and helping others silence the inner critic in their mind. His book, Stop Thinking Thoughts That Scare You, is basically a selfless help guide of practical tools to eliminate fear and anxiety and live a life of abundance. Noah lives a big life today. He's a 57-year-old soul cycle instructor in New York City. The oldest soul cycle instructor in the world, he tells me, also a certified life coach. I've known this guy for about 15, 20 years. You're going to listen to this podcast and you're going to want to call BS. I'm telling you, this is all true. But first, a guy who actually had Noah in his wedding party. See how it all comes around? Kevin Souza.
Stand by the ocean floor.
Hello, Pete Souza.
Noa Shaw, what's up, man?
What's going on, my brother? How are you?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. You're talking to me, and Mike is the producer. Mike, say hi.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
How much time do we have with you?
You have right up until 5 on the dot.
Okay.
So I have to leave and get to work. So you've got 56 minutes and counting.
All right, let's get going.
I'm honored to be asked. Thank you.
And honestly, it's so crazy. The circle of life is insane. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to touch on that. But the book is called "Stop Thinking Thoughts That Scare You." Noa Shaw is the author. He's joining us now. Noah, you've been sober for a while. What is your sobriety date?
Well, let's see. I had my last drink in February of 1988, but I then had 15 years sober. And right before my 15th anniversary, I decided in the last year from 14 to 15, I just stopped going to meetings and I stopped working our program. So right before my 15th anniversary, I decided that I told my friend we were in a hotel room in Vegas. I said, I'm either put a gun in my mouth or a joint because he was smoking weed. And he handed me a joint. And I went on about a 3.5-year run for just smoking weed. And so my sobriety date now currently is 9/17/07.
Okay, 9/17/07. So about 14 years.
It'll be 14 years in September. Yes, sir.
So take me back. You have a crazy story, and that's the reason I asked how much time you have is because there's so much to get into.
There's a lot. That's why people should buy the book. People should buy the book.
You go back, I mean, you talk about the fact, I like what you say, you had great parents. You know, a lot of people have this situation where, I had a rough upbringing, or that's not your story. And I think that shows what alcoholism is. It doesn't discriminate. You said you had great parents and you had a real solid upbringing, besides the fact you moved around all over the place.
I mean, yeah, besides the moving, but you and I are similar to that. Amazing parents. Your mom is like one of my favorite people. It's like, and you and your brothers, and it's like, it really doesn't matter, what my origin story is. I always, people say like, why am I an alcoholic? And it's like, even if like, some godlike figure produced themselves in front of me tomorrow, is like, this is why you're an alcoholic. This is why you're a drug addict. It really wouldn't change anything at all in my life because I would just keep doing what I'm doing. And it's like, there were events. I have a lot of, trauma in my past. I have a lot of, PTSD. I've had people try to murder me. I've tried to kill myself 3 times. I was sexually assaulted I was 10 and the girl was 14. And for the last 50-something years, I didn't think of it as sexual assault until I told my friend the story a year ago. And he's like, that's sexual assault. And I was like, it was a story that I thought was cool because I was 10 and she was 14. And I bragged about it for 40 years or 45 years or whatever it was. And then thinking of it as sexual assault, just because it's heterosexual doesn't mean I wasn't assaulted, you know? So it was like that changed my mind. So I have a lot of trauma that I buried and I pushed down and I tried to keep away. And, you know, I can't say for sure that's why I'm an alcoholic. It's just part of the mosaic that ends up, no matter what you put into it, ends up with, yes, I'm an alcoholic. So now what? So I got sober, you know, and it took me a long time. And I went to 12 rehabs, and 11 of those, I had sex with every woman I could. I broke every rule I could. I drank in most of them. I drank, used pot, used weed, coke, anything, and I got away with whatever I could get away with in every rehab because I didn't want to be sober. I just wanted to like recover physically and financially and get back in my parents' good graces so they would loan me money so I could go on another run.
Yeah, you mentioned it almost like it sounds like those rehabs for a lot of the time, if not all of it, it was like getting rest for you, catching up on sleep and kind of like 3 hots in a cot and then kind of going on what's next. Yeah.
Camp, alcoholic camp.
I think it's fair for people. I want to give them background because it is super cool. I was a kid. I was probably 25 or 26. I went to visit my brother Kevin in California, in Los Angeles, and we're having a great time. And he takes me over. He says, "I'm going to take you somewhere. You got to meet this guy. He's one of my best friends." And he brings me to this house. I think it was like off Wilshire Boulevard. And I remember there was ivy Melrose. There was ivy all along Melrose.
Yeah,
Melrose. Ivy all along the outside. And it was your place. And I walk inside, and clearly, this guy is, first of all, everybody calls you Papa because you're like a dad to everybody. And it's through my past, right, I've walked into the houses of a lot of drug dealers, but none so sophisticated and none so warm. And I walk in there and it was very clear you were one of the more generous guys. You helped my brother out. I know you're in his wedding and that's the kind of guy you are. But then flash forward to 2 years ago. At this point in time, I'm sober, 7, 8 years, and I'm in a meeting on Long Island in Southampton, and I'm hearing this guy share in front of me, and he's got a bald head, and I see he's got black nails. His nails are painted black, and he's got tattoos everywhere. And you are not the kind of guy that somebody forgets. And I'm like, that's Noah. And there you were.
And then I looked at you, and I'm like, fucking Pete Sousa. I'm like, you and your family have always, your brother Kevin originally have, meant so much to me. And I watched him, he worked for me for many years, and I would watch him struggle. And, and no matter how much he struggled, I never stopped loving him. I never stopped caring about him. And, he was just, him and you and your brothers and everybody around you was always so amazing. And I think there's a Sousa magnetism of capturing good people that I've come to know. And there are always good people around you guys because you are, no matter what the circumstances, whether drunk or not, there's an energy to you guys of camaraderie and fellowship and friendship and family. So you guys have always felt like family to me. Whether it's been 8 years I've seen you or I saw you last week, you're still family.
It's unbelievable. You're always
going to be that.
And thank you for saying all that nice stuff. And you get caught up in the web. So we'll get to what happened in between, 2004 and 2019. 2004 when I was at your house on Melrose, and then 2019 when I saw you in that meeting. But you had your first drink at 10 years old. How did it affect you? Take me through that.
A lot of people in sobriety, you'll hear them go, "Oh, I had my first drink and it made me feel so good. And I felt all this amazing spiritual moment." And the best way I can describe it is by 10 years old, I had so much insecurity, so many negative self-thoughts, that I was weird looking, that I was different. I had weird hair. I had a weird name. I had a weird family, and there was a lot. I felt very much separated from everybody else. I didn't feel cool in any way, shape, or form. And the way I describe it, when I started drinking, my father was an advertising salesman, and for Christmas he used to give out bottles of wild turkey. So he would order like 40 cases of wild turkey, let's say, off the back of a truck from some Italian guys he did business with, keeping that as confidential as possible, protecting my father. But he would needed 20 for his clients. I mean, he would keep 20 to last him a year. So, because that's what he liked to drink. So there was always bottles of wild turkey. So I took a bottle, me and my best friend Vinny. We went in the woods in central Connecticut, Manchester, Connecticut, and we drank. And I remember, and this is all, hindsight, I remember feeling like I didn't hate myself as much as I normally hated myself. That it numbed and just quieted the voices in my head of self-doubt and insecurity and self-loathing a little bit. And that's what everything did for until I stopped. Every snort of cocaine, every ounce of cocaine I snorted, every bag of weed I smoked, every pill I took, every acid and every drug you can imagine, every heroin I snorted, like it just, all it was trying to do was just quiet the voices a little bit. The voices, that inner critic that is so loud. And that's what it did. That's what drinking started off as for me.
How did you get involved with dealing drugs like you did? I mean, you just talked about it. You basically became a black belt in substance abuse, and you also became a black belt in dealing drugs. How did that evolve?
There were when I was that 10 years old, I remember I had a friend, Sean Murphy, and we had tried pot a couple times with his sister. There's another friend with another sister who was older. And one time I remember her saying, like, Noah, if you want to smoke pot with me again, you have to bring this bag up the street to the Carlson's house. I can't remember what it was. I was like, okay. So I went up the street and I rang the Carlson's doorbell, and I had this little bag, and I handed it to the kid who answered, and he handed me $10, and I brought the $10 back to her. So I was like maybe 11 years old. That was my first drug deal. I was involved. I was a runner.
Did you get a rush from that that you can remember?
I didn't get a rush from that. I didn't know what was going on, so I wasn't aware. It wasn't even a transaction at that point. I just knew I liked the feeling of smoking pot. So I was like, I'll just do whatever you tell me to do. But then in high school, like right before high school, I tried cocaine, and I found my one true love. And I sort of had the realization, like I was speaking earlier, like, actually, sorry, I was speaking to somebody else about this, that I can't do this like casually. I can't do this at a low rate. I need this all the time in my life. And I very quickly got connected because, maybe God, I believe in God, maybe the plan was, whatever it was. I found my friend was like, hey, do you want to start selling cocaine? And I was like, yeah. He goes, I've got this big supply coming from my family. He was Italian in Miami, and I want to work with you because everybody knows you and you're good at hustling. So we started selling, and that was like, started out at a high school, started out at many schools all over the city, started out going to Studio 54, selling it 5 nights a week at Studio 54, coming home with like $60,000, $70,000 in the lining of my coat. That led to like bigger, dealing kilos and big bags and big bulk shipments and dealing with crazy Colombians and stuff like that. So it escalated very quickly. And I was there for it. And yes, all of that I got a rush from. There was a rush of that. There was a rush of excitement and danger. And there was the feeling of like, oh, people like me because I have cocaine.
I mean, it's hard to get into Studio 54. We're talking about the late 70s, early 80s. You're 57 now.
I'm 57 now. I was 15 then.
Yeah. Okay. So you're 15 and you're going to Studio 54 and you're selling
1978
and you're selling coke.
Yes.
What is that? I mean, that's got to be euphoric power times 100.
It was crazy. It was just a whirlwind. I was doing business. I was getting so fucked up. It was, and I will say this without a shadow of a doubt. Studio 54 was the greatest nightclub ever in the history of the nightclubs. It will never be anything as good again because of technology, because of cameras, because of people, because of sexual mores and the tightening of the ships and diseases and everything around. It was the greatest place. It was like Disneyland for adults. and it was fucking amazing. And it was, yes, it was euphoric, but everybody who was there will tell you, I don't remember anything, but I remember that feeling of just every night was the greatest night of your life. There was never like, oh, it's a slow night, let's get out of here. Like every night was a fucking Roman bacchanal of just hedonism and just liberty.
Are you dealing to celebrities?
No, not that I knew of.
Okay.
I'm sure I was, but I don't know.
Okay.
Like, and it wasn't hard to get in when you had one of the, all the bunch of the bouncers and a bunch of people that could sneak me in a side door, would like grab me and just throw me inside because I wasn't, I was a big, I was 5'9", 155 pounds from freshman year of high school till I was 40. I was the same size, but I wasn't ever a big guy. So it was like, and I blended in the crowd very well. I was a little chameleon.
You're moving weight at 15 years old, basically. Do you start to experience consequences at any point in time?
No, not really. Not until I became my best customer. That's when the consequences happened. It was just great. Life was great. I was having the time of my fucking life. Legitimately one of the times of my life. It was crazy, but it was fun. It was euphoric. It was New York City. It was great. I was like hanging out in the Bronx, and remember it was like 1978, 79, 80, 81, 82. Like I was hanging out in the Bronx during, we were living in Stamford, Connecticut, which is about 30 minutes outside of the city. And I was attending school. Every afternoon I'd be, I'd grab the train and jump down to the Bronx, hang out with the homies who I'd known for like years. I was watching the birth of hip hop, breakdancing, shit like that. Great daytime parties, smoking weed, drinking 40s. Then I would go downtown, have some dinner, with some people, then go to CBGB's, watch some punk rock and the birth of punk rock, the heyday of punk rock rather. And then go to Studio 54 at like, 12 o'clock or 1 a.m. Stay there till 5 or 6 and then go to homeroom.
You had a genius IQ, you put in your book, but you graduated at the bottom of your high school class. That's kind of all you need to know about a guy that hustles.
Bottom 5%.
Bottom 5%. Okay. Not the complete bottom.
No, that is the bottom. I wasn't last, but I was one of the 10 last.
When was the first time you went to rehab? Even if it was just for like camp, when was the first time?
I think 1983. I want to say somewhere 82, 83, maybe 83. And, my parents were like, you need help. And I'm like, okay, great. So they took me to some place in Hartford called the Institute for Living. And there was a lockdown psych unit. Like, I'm not a crazy person. I'm an alcoholic. I knew I was an alcoholic at a very young age, and that's in the book as well. But I was a lockdown psych unit, and I just grabbed all my stuff about the end of the first week, waited for the door to open, and somebody walked through it and ran to the door, grabbed the door, ran down the stairs, ran out the door, and literally there's this massive campus in Hartford with these huge stone walls, and I've got orderlies chasing me, and I threw my shit over the wall, jumped up on the wall, jumped down, and ran away, and then went on about a 2-week run and checked into another rehab called the Silver Hills Foundation in New Canaan, Connecticut.
Sure.
I was there for a little less than 30 days before they threw me out because I was getting high. They had a bunch of it's really high end. It still is. And there were a bunch of these insanely hot bottles, and I was banging all of them, and I was drinking, and it was not far from where I grew up. So they had a wooded air walk where you could take a nature walk. And at night, I had all my buddies meeting me at the nature walk with a quarter keg or 6 cases of beer and a bunch of booze and Coke. And I would say, I'm going on a nature walk and sign out and, come stumbling back 2 hours later and slide into my house and just crash in bed and pass out. So
where do you think that came from? Like that instinct to hustle, that instinct to be up to no good. Was it like an insecurity thing, or was it like did it make you feel good?
I think if I had to really dig deep, I think it was a lack of self-worth and thinking that I was worth help, that I was worth saving. I had realized early on that I was an alcoholic, and I thought that's just what I was going to be for the rest of my life. I was right, but I was wrong about the practicing part. So I think I didn't think I was worthy of saving. So why even bother? Why even go through the motions? I'd pretend I'd go to meetings and stuff like that, but I didn't care about sobriety. I didn't want sobriety because I wasn't worth that.
Your father and you have this conversation, and you mentioned you tried to take your life 3 times, but you also talk about how they were kind of half-baked attempts. Almost like whether they were cries for help, whether you were reaching out. You really said you couldn't put your finger on it, but you had a conversation with your dad, and you told him, "Hey, I think I'm going to kill myself." And take me through that conversation. It's extremely poignant.
Okay, it's a long story, but the end of this story is that I was living in Utah, and I woke up a week later in a hotel room in Chicago. And I had just seen my parents in Utah because they helped me out because I was doing so well. And I woke up in a hotel room, and some girl had been a party for a week. I didn't know what city I was in. I didn't know what day it was. I called down to the front desk. I'm like, where am I? And what day is it? And they were like, it's Sunday, and you need to be out of your room in the next 30 minutes, Mr. Shaw. And I was like, okay. I got kicked out, grabbed I had like maybe a change of clothing. And I walked to a payphone, and I called my father to collect. And he said, where are you? I answered, of course. He accepted the charges. And I said, I'm in Chicago. He goes, where's the car we just bought you? I was like, it's gone. I sold it. Where's the clothing? Where's the apartment we paid for? So it's gone. Where's the job we have? Gone. Where's the money we put in your bank account? It's gone. It's all gone, Dad. And I said, Dad, I think I'm going to kill myself. And my father said, if that's what you have to do, Noah, then that's what you have to do. And hung up on me. So when you take these loving people and you push them to a place where they legitimately think everybody, them, the whole family, everybody that knows you, and you as well, are going to be in less pain. If you're dead, that's a pretty fucking dark place. And that's a pretty deep place to push parents to. When a parent tells a child to kill themselves, that's about the end of the road.
Hi, I'm Hank. You might remember me from a show called King of the Hill. Check out a King of the Hill rewatch podcast. These boys ain't right, but they are funny. Find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com. I tell you what.
You have that talk with your father, and sometimes people listen to this that have kids that struggle with addiction, and that tough love. I mean, did that work for you? I remember my brother Kevin had gotten sober, and he just basically said that he had considered me a dead man walking.
But it wasn't tough love. It was complete resignation that I was going to be dead. They'd spent decades waiting for a phone call that I was dead. And my father just didn't think that I was going to live any longer. So it wasn't loving me. He loved me as much as he could. He was just finally fell into acceptance that his son was going to die very soon. And do I carry that around? It's not something it's like an old shirt. It's in the bottom drawer of my dresser. And when I take it out to help other people so that I can gain access and gain trust. That I've been, as dark as anybody has been, I've been about where you are, if not darker. So that allows me access and gains confidence in people so that I can then help them. But that's the only time. And if I'm not using that, wearing that shirt to help somebody, I put it back in the fucking drawer and I don't take it out. I don't look at it because it's not a pleasant memory, but it's an important memory. But only in the effect, only in the way of how it can help somebody else.
You've experienced so much, and your positivity enables you to be a life coach today, people gravitate towards you. And you've talked about that, the fact that you can kind of see grief on people and that enables you to help them.
I see pain. I can feel it. And that's why before I was Papa, I was Uncle Noah in high school, and I was Uncle Noah everywhere. And everywhere in high school, I was Uncle Noah. Everybody called me that. I was sort of this guy that if you were in pain, you came to me and I helped you out and I gave you a solution. And then I went to school in Texas, 3,000 miles away, and I was there for a week, and somebody referred to me as Uncle Noah. There was no internet. Nobody knew that was my nickname. I never told anybody that was my nickname. It was just this sort of like role that I play. And then I turned 30 and somebody called me Papa in Boston at a nightclub I was running. And then I moved to California. Still no internet. I mean, it had been invented, but nobody was on it. You know, this is like early 90s. And I'm another bar and somebody goes, "Hey, Papa." And it's like, it just followed me, you know. So I put off this sort of vibe of I'm a safe place for people.
Which was crazy when you consider what you were involved in. I mean, that in itself is a very unique talent.
It's a gift. You know, I've been like, you know, I was a big drug dealer, and I had all these people that would come to my house and hang out and smoke weed. And, I'd be talking to other like massive drug dealers. They'd be like, "Man, you got a minute? Can I talk to you about something?" I'm like, "Sure." You know, we're doing like some huge cocaine deal, and they're like, "Yeah, man, can I talk to you about some shit that's going on in my life right now?" I'd be like, "Sure." And they would just pour their hearts out to me. And I'd be like, "Well, you should look at it like this and this and this," even when I was 16, 17, you know. And my entire life, it's been that way. People in pain come to me, you know, they find me. And my job, once I got sober this last time in 2007, is I was forced to go to a meeting at this rehab I was in called Criminals and Gang Members Anonymous. It was started by a guy named Richard Mexico, who was serving a life sentence in California. And it was for people who were addicted to the rush of crime. And I was sort of listening, but not listening because I didn't want to be there. And I was playing with my phone. I think I was playing Snake or whatever, Minecraft, whatever was like, you know, the basic toy game that came with your phones back then. And I had this feeling, I felt like this pressure on my chest. And I had this moment. And I don't want this voice, it sounds funny if I say this voice, it's sort of hard to describe. I had this internal dialogue, and it said, "Noah, you've put so much pain into this world. All the cocaine, all the weed, all the drug dealing, all the crime, all the things that you've done. You need to spend your life helping people heal to try to make up for the pain that you've caused." So that was the moment that I dedicated my life to healing, helping other people in whatever manner that meant. So I go out every morning. I pray every morning and every night, and I say the same prayer, like God, please let me help people.
And
help people.
And you talk about the fact that you've gotten the gift of helping people because that really supersedes all the feelings you got from this other life, which sounds as sexy as it gets as you're talking to me, but it's all bullshit too when you think about what you're doing, how you're treating people, and now you're on the other side and you're really living in the sunlight.
It's just this it's this beautiful, beautiful life I get to lead. And I was one of the rehabs I was in, I was a big book thumper because there were a bunch of guys who were really into the big book. So I was like, all right, I'll join these guys. And they had like gotten dictionaries from the year that the big book was published. And one of the things I love is when the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says, "As we trudge this road of happy destiny." So they had trudge sounds like a very like sludge, fudge. It sounds very like a heavy, dark, sort of like gritty, like a lot of lifting. But the actual definition of the word trudge from back then is to walk with purpose. So as I trudge along, I walk with a purpose. My purpose is very defined at every moment. It's just, how can I help people? Where can I help people? Putting myself out there at all times. Like, I'm here to help. In my podcast, like, Let It Go, it's still on. It's still up on Apple and iTunes, whatever, but I haven't recorded an episode in about a year.
But it's still up there. It's like, it's like an archive of therapy for people.
Yeah, and I'll get back to it eventually. My book, I wrote the book and I made it short and I made it easy access, 104 pages, and you could sit down and read it very quickly. And I wrote the book to help people. I'm not going to get rich off it. I'm not going to, make $1 million. I didn't go through a publisher or get an advance or anything. You know, I just wrote it and self-published it to help people.
The book is called Stop Thinking Thoughts That Scare You by Noa Shaw. And what's the podcast? Just one more time so people can grab it.
I'm here to help.
I'm here to help. Noa Shaw. It's on all the platforms. Noah, before you ended up in that meeting you talked about where you had that moment, that, aha moment for lack of a better term, how did the walls close in on you out in LA? Because you ended up in a situation, you've talked about it, where you were facing 15 years in prison.
Yeah, I was dealing. There's something in New York, and I don't know if you're not from New York, you don't know it, but it's called a weed delivery, and it's been around since the 80s. And you call up a number, and somebody in a bike messenger shows up at your apartment in New York City and sells you weed. And I opened the very first weed delivery service in Los Angeles in 2001, and I had 3,000 clients within 90 days, and it exploded up until I was employing like 5 guys, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And they were out on the road and business was booming. And I know the rules, so I never kept anything at my house. But I had one guy, we had a storage space, and he handled all the deliveries of all the bulk, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 pounds of weed. Everything would go right in the storage space, and he would work out of there and kept everything there, all the scales and baggies and everything, and he was going on vacation. And this other guy was covering for him. I had a massive delivery of weed come in, and I was home, and I had a massive pile of money at my house. And it was the first time I'd ever kept bulk drugs and money at my house ever in my entire career dealing. And this is where God intervened. And these cops, we were smoking a joint, sitting in my fucking room, sitting in my house playing Tiger Woods video game. And I was like, they came and they knocked on the door. He said, "Mr. Shaw." I said, "Yeah." I said, we're here to arrest you. We can smell the marijuana outside. I was like, "I don't have any marijuana." They're like, "Well, you can smell it clearly." And they turned me around and put handcuffs on me. And as I walked through the door, I pulled the door closed behind me. And they were like, "We need to go inside, see what you've got inside." I said, "Get a warrant." And they were like, "Mr. Shaw, we know you have a quarter pound, a half pound of weed. This is going to be a very simple thing. We're just a little slap on the wrist. You go to drug diversion court." I was like, "Get a warrant." I sat out there for fucking 6 hours while they tried to get a warrant. They're like, "Listen, we know where it is. It's in the second bedroom in a black bag." I was like, "Get a warrant." Because I had 50 pounds of weed and about $200,000 or $300,000 in cash in my first bedroom. And it was only supposed to be there for 5 minutes. And they got a warrant. And they went in. The warrant said second bedroom, black gym bag in the closet. And they walked in. They're like, "There's nothing here, nothing here." And I knew somebody must have flipped on me because only somebody who was my friend or had been in my bedroom would know that that's where I kept my stash. And I never kept more than a couple of ounces because I wasn't an idiot. But apparently I was an idiot. And they finally got a warrant. And they was like, "We'll check the other bedroom." And I hear the one cop go, Sarge, holy shit. This is why he wanted a warrant. Oh my fucking God. And all the cops ran in. And they were like, "Holy shit, yeah." And they're high-fiving each other. And luckily for me, when everything got to the police station, most of the money and most of the weed had been stolen by the cops. So what I got caught with was about 20 pounds of weed and about $60,000. I can't remember the exact numbers. So, but that was still, I was a white boy in a nice neighborhood, and they wanted to make an example of me. So,
and you get a lawyer, but you end up facing 15 years in prison. And
yeah, they wanted to make an example of me. So they went really high. My lawyer was better than them.
And so you end up getting sober on the back end of all this. You avoid going to prison.
Yep.
Do you go right from LA to New York, or do you go from LA to rehab for a while and then New York? How does that work?
Well, I got arrested in LA. I went to rehab in LA, and then I lived in LA for a bunch more years working in rehabs. I started working in the rehab that I was in. I started, becoming a case manager. Then I went to work for another rehab. And it just sort of from there, it became like a big thing, and I worked in rehab. I did a lot of sober companion work and life coaching work, helping people out. And then, I went on from there.
And it's still, this is driven by that moment, right? That voice that you have to help people. And you're, and like a typical, like this is what happens to somebody who gets sober is there's action involved. And so you're a man of action on either side of this, as we've learned. But the action you're taking now is starting to help people. And are you starting to get that feeling, that juice, from helping people that you would get from the other stuff before?
It's better. It wasn't with everything else. It was like, it was a juice, but it was also this risk of my life and my freedom. Now, my life didn't immediately begin to heal just because I started helping people. But over time, it's built up into something that it's indescribable to me. I don't recognize my life. I'm on the phone with you. I'm sitting in the backyard of my apartment in Brooklyn. I'm back home in New York City, which I love. So it didn't happen instantly, but what happens when you get sober and when you start really doing the deal, as they say in whatever 12-step program you're involved with, your life grows at levels you can't imagine.
I mean, it's amazing.
It's so beautiful.
You talk about it like you wouldn't even recognize the person that you were when you were in the depths of dealing and the grips of addiction. The person you are now, I mean, it's so different that you wouldn't. It's hard to imagine that you were that person. I know it's hard for me, but it's real. It's real. We were those people.
Yeah, we have, and I have pictures to remind me. And every picture of me, I look. I have pictures of me at like 20 and 24, and I look older. Without the beard, I look older then than I do now at 57, because I was just I had abused my body and my spirit and my mind so much, and I was so deep and dark. We sort of touched on my suicide attempts earlier, but they were serious suicide attempts. You take 70 Tylenol, snort half ounce of cocaine, and chug a bottle of Jack Daniels. You're trying to die, And I had a number of situations like that where I had to be rushed to the hospital and they had to pump me full of charcoal to get everything out of the system, save my life, and resuscitate me. So it's like, yes, they were cries for help. They were full on serious. And now, I don't think about killing myself every day anymore.
Yeah.
And that's just that alone, just the relief of that is huge.
So you end up in New York, and then, Soul Cycle becomes, first of all, you drop 100 pounds when you start to.
I'm in LA. Because I was working in rehab and I started focusing so much on other people, I lost track of taking care of myself. So I start eating and smoking cigarettes while I'm working with people. It's a lot of redirection when you work in rehab. Hey, you're sitting inside. Hey, you don't feel well? Great. Let's go outside and have a cigarette. Or you're sitting outside. Let's go inside and get something to eat. So I'm doing that all 12 to 14 hours a day.
Which works for a guy that just came in and strung out on heroin. But for you, it's like, damn, now you're doing,
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, so I end up at 300 pounds. I walk in, there's no accidents in my world. I ended up at Soul Cycle, which I was sort of ancillary attached to because I'd helped one of the people who was the founder to escape New York, escape LA, because she was on a terrible crack and meth addict. And she ended up being the founding instructor of Soul Cycle. So what's her name?
Into
Soul Cycle. Her name is Stacy Griffin.
Okay.
And so I had sent her to New York with a few $1,000. She'd fallen in love with this woman. I said, go chase your love, get the fuck out of LA or you're gonna die. And so they knew who I was when I walked in the opening day of Soul Cycle by accident. She was going to my underwear. But I just started riding, and I realized I didn't want to die. And I was so fat that the week before my first class, I'd had a doctor's appointment. My doctor had been my doctor for about 15, 16 years. He said, you're not going to feel a thing. And I said, am I getting a shot? And he goes, no, you're about to have a heart attack. It's going to be so big, you're not going to feel a thing. You're not going to grab your chest. You're not going to grab your arm. You're not going to feel anything. You're going to be dead when you hit the ground. He goes, I love you. It's been great knowing you. I'll never see you again. So then I went to Soul Cycle, and I was like, about halfway through, I was like, I don't want to die. And if I do die, I'm going to die like, I'm not going to die because I ate so much fucking food, with cheeseburgers, fucking Big Macs. I'm going to die trying hard. So I just started pedaling like a crazy person. And I went back the next day and I took 2 classes. And I took another 2 classes. I couldn't stop going. Lost a little over 100 pounds in a little over 90 days. And they asked me, do you want to be a Soul Cycle instructor? So you go from your doctor telling you you're going to die to, hey, do you want to be a fitness instructor in 100 days? That's the miracle of me showing up for my life.
You're a life coach too, correct?
Yes, certified life coach.
The certified life coach. And I love what you say, because everybody can use this. Alcoholics, especially in my case. I had this guy going in my head today, the self-critic, dude. I mean, how do people, I mean, people got to buy the book and read it, but how do people silence the self-critic?
The most powerful tool that we have at our disposal, that anybody has at our disposal, is gratitude. See, what happens when the critic is going is you're locked into one perspective of who you are and what your life is. So whenever you're going through anything, stop, just pause for a couple minutes and write down 5 or 6 things that you're grateful for in your life. When we start directing our mind away from negativity and anger and sadness and low self-worth and self-criticism, when we start looking at how beautiful, fulfilled our lives are, it derails that high-speed train that's going one direction and turns it and goes in the completely opposite direction. And it's love. It's loving your life. It's loving your life and realizing as you are enough right now. You're perfect and you're beautiful and you're amazing and you're a great human being. And you crack people up and your Instagram is fun and you do this, and the podcast, and you help whatever thousands of people through this, and you get to work with your friend Mike, who's the engineer now, like the producer rather. It's like, hey, look at the big expansion of your life. And, I'm honored to know you. Like I follow your Instagram because I love it, to see how well you're doing. It inspires me. And then you have a platform like the news, and you get to smile and tell a couple jokes and make fun here and there. Maybe lift people's spirits because there's hundreds of people watching you. That's so powerful. It's a beautiful thing. So when we start counting the blessings, you nor anyone died from these.
Hold on, I lost you for a second. You there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I said neither you nor your brothers died from this deadly disease.
Yeah, and there's a lot of gratitude to be had in that.
That's beautiful. So when we start focusing on all we have, all you're doing is when we're thinking negative thoughts is I'm counting what I don't have.
Yeah.
I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't have a wife, I don't have any kids, I'm lonely, I'm 57, blah, blah. I do that. I have a dog, I have an apartment, I have a job I love, I have a couple jobs I love, I have a book I published.
I start counting my blessings and stop counting yours. Is that how that mentality? Is that how you kind of keep in a state of grace?
We have our moments. We all do. I'd love to. I wish I was a shining example of like just this perfect fucking life, but I'm human. I'm an alcoholic, so I have to work on my spirituality constantly. I have to work on my gratitude constantly. I do it every morning, every day, I should say. I have a little gratitude app that pops up a little notification. It'll say something like, don't forget how you have a great life. Don't forget to write about it. So it makes me list, I usually do 5 or 6 things. And then I screenshot it and I share it with a friend of mine in Seattle who I've never met, but we know each other through Zoom. And he sends me his gratitude list and keeps me accountable. So I make sure I do it every day.
How do 12-step meetings help you in your recovery?
They're everything. It's what puts my disease into remission. It's the meetings, it's the steps, it's the people, it's the fellowship, it's the companionship, it's people who've had the exact same experience, who either are ahead of me in this program, who can say, oh, I've gone through that already. Well, here's what I did. Or there are people who are new to this, so I can stop and go, hey, I know what you're going through. Here's what I did. My sponsor has coming up on 49 years of sobriety. It inspires me and teaches And, then I go to meetings with guys who have days or weeks or months or years, a year or so. I think, okay, this is how I handle that.
How do you handle the dating scene? I mean, that's always like a tough one. Guys always ask that, or girls ask that. You get sober.
I'm the wrong person to ask. I dated somebody. After 8 years, we broke up last summer, and I was just finding my first date a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, all I did was compare her to my ex. So I will gladly bow out of that question, and just go like, I'm not the expert I wish I was, and I'm 57, and I don't expect a lot more dating in my life. So I just, if you're sober and you believe in a higher power of some sort, know that it's all going to work out no matter what's going on in your life. As long as you take care of you, life will work out.
It's funny, man. I mean, but that's kind of like the best answer you can give somebody in recovery. It's like, look, I don't have the answer, but let's go find you somebody who does. I mean, and that's kind of how we roll.
Yeah.
What was it like for you when you got sober? And like, I like asking this question, like sober sex. What was that like for you?
Oh, fucking amazing. I was completely fucking present. I was completely aware. I was completely aware of what I was doing. I was completely aware of my sexual partner's needs and how they felt, and watching them. I was like fucking drunk. It was like, and I've dated very few and had sex with very few sober women. I don't mind dating girls that are drunk, but like paying attention to your sexual partner is amazing because you can see their little physical and verbal cues, and you do something and they say, oh shit, that feels really good. And then you keep doing that. I like to be a good sexual partner. I can care more about how they feel than I feel because I've had enough sex, and boys, we start masturbating so young, and it's like, okay, I know what it is to come. I'm good. I'm like, I know what that is, and eventually I'll get there. But like, let's take care of you. Sort of like the best possible way to be of service.
Yeah, I'm sure many women would wish that guys would take that advice. So hopefully.
Well, I am single. Slide into my DMs, please. I haven't dropped hope of having a child at someday. So if you're in your 30s, you want to have a kid, you don't mind a 57-year-old man, hit me up.
I got a couple more things for you. By the way, Instagram is Noa 20. What is it? Noa 26.
Noa Shaw 26. Noa Shaw 26. No H.
Okay, no H. NOA Shaw 26. That's one of the best parts about you is you're so accessible through Instagram. You always respond to people, and I think that's you're always there to help people. And I think that's so important, in what you do, your walk of life. It's not just like, hey, buy the book. You're still there for people that are looking for answers and looking for help. I want to ask you a couple more questions. One of them is, you seemed like you had these incredible relationships when you were even out there. Like when you were dealing drugs, when I went over to your house in 2004, everybody flocked to you. And now you have these amazing relationships today. What's the biggest difference between those two sets of relationships?
My presence, my emotional, spiritual, and physical presence, emotional and spiritual presence, that I'm more available for people than I ever could have been when I was using. I was there as best I could be. But, I could be talking to somebody and getting blindly high at the exact same time. And when I'm high, I'm not as present as I'd like to be. Now, when I'm with you and I'm talking to you, whether it's FaceTime or Zoom or whatever, it's like I'm there. I'm 100% here for you. I'm available, and I'm able to help, and I'm able to more clearly see the solution in the most loving way possible.
What do you tell somebody that's got a day and they're hanging on and they say, hey man, like, how do I do this? How do I stay sober?
Just hang on to that day. You just go and the old statement, like every journey begins with a single step. Like some days still for me, it's about getting through the day, putting one foot in front of the other, making a bunch of phone calls, letting people know how you feel is the most important thing. When you share your truth with somebody else, you say, hey, you called me, I'm having a really rough time. And you keep calling people and keep talking until it's like 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, you fall asleep, and you've got that day. You've got a full day, and you've got that taken care of. You've made it through another day. That's the amazing thing. You just get through the day. reprieve, daily reprieve. But just keep asking for help. And that was the hardest thing for me to do, is ask for help.
So you're 57 years old. You're the oldest Soul Cycle instructor in New York City. Is that correct?
In the world.
In the world. And so if people want to, I got friends, people in the city, it's obviously open back up. If they want to go see you, if they want to take one of your classes, where do they go?
They go to the Soul Cycle website or the Soul Cycle app. I always say that I'm an easy man to assassinate if you're trying to, because everywhere I'm going to teach, listen on the website exactly what time I'm going to be there, exactly what time I'm teaching.
Okay.
And come say hi, and come say hi before I get there early, so I can say hello to people. And I stay late, so if there's people I need to talk to, and if you want to talk, or you want to get coffee, or you want to chat, or you want to DM me, whatever it is, like I'm here for everybody.
And we can get the book on where? On Amazon, right?
Amazon, yeah. No, you can look up Noa Shaw. You can look up Stop Thinking Thoughts That Scare You, and it's a simple, small book. It's 104 pages. I intentionally made it an easy read. It doesn't take a big commitment, but it's small but powerful.
Yeah, well, you're a powerful guy, dude. No, I can't thank you enough for the time, brother. It's really great to circle back and to have these kind of moments with you now. It's a special deal.
I love you so much, Pete. You're such a great guy, and please send all the best to your family. I'm happy to be Sousa adjacent.
We're happy to have you, brother.
All right, man. Love you, Pete.
All right, man. Love you too. Take it easy, Noah.
Peace.
Later. Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.
Frozen heroes. Gonna tell you about frozen heroes. Gonna tell you about.
Hey, I'm Zach,
And I'm Mike.
and we have a fantastic new podcast to tell you about. Bros, Foes, and Heroes. It's the two of us looking into the world of comics, breaking down some characters that you may have never heard of, and some that are just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, so Zach comes up with a character each time, and I go into it just completely blind. I don't know who this person is or what their abilities are or anything, and basically I guess we kind of go over their origin story and just some of the ridiculous stuff that maybe, especially Golden Age stuff.
Oh, Golden Age stuff is always the best, and we will make sure to highlight all of the shenanigans and just absolute weirdness of everything.
Yeah, that's right. So subscribe today and follow us on Instagram at Bros Foes Heroes.
And if you don't, I know where you live. Not really, but please subscribe.
Frozen heroes. Gonna tell you about frozen heroes. Gonna tell you about.
Hi, I'm Hank. You might remember me from a show called King of the Hill. Check out a King of the Hill rewatch podcast. These boys ain't rap, but they are funny. Find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com. I tell you what.